So as we come here, we are faced with a perplexing sequence as we come to the Transfiguration. And one reason I did want to come to this text today is we have, for the last 2 weeks in John, if you've noticed, been talking about the glory of Jesus in different ways. We talked about how Isaiah, it was just an amazing thing that they had. It says that Isaiah saw Jesus' glory whenever he was quoted in Isaiah 6. And John thought that, or said that Isaiah saw Jesus' glory, which is an amazing thing. And so I wanted to come to a passage that also talks about Jesus' glory, and another one that I also think is speaking of Jesus' glory. But this is the passage that everybody thinks about when they think about the glory of Jesus being most revealed, right? But there's a perplexing sequence that happens before this. Peter finally confesses that Jesus is the Messiah, the Christ. And Jesus says, man, flesh and bone has not revealed this to you, Simon. This is from God. Only God has revealed this to you. And it is an amazing thing as I was reading that it's once you come to faith, you just, all these things about Jesus start getting more revealed to you in such a way. And you're like, wow, I didn't believe that before. Now I do. Now I do. Now I do. When you're an unbeliever, you weren't getting these revelations from God. But flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but God has. And so Peter thinks he's the Christ, the Messiah, King, and so he thinks Jesus is going to go rule. And so it's perplexing to Peter that the very next thing that Jesus is going to teach them for the first time in the gospel is that when we get to Jerusalem, I'm not going to sit on a throne, I'm going to be crucified. And so Peter immediately, and we know that he was Satan's mouthpiece, as Jesus says, "Get behind me, Satan," when he talks. Peter goes to Jesus like, this isn't going to happen to you. You're not going to go to the cross and die. And so immediately after that, telling Peter and them that Jesus tells them that he's going to die. Right after that, he takes three of them up a mountain, James, John, and Peter, and he takes them up a mountain into the Transfiguration. This is the sequence we're in. And I think the reason I'm saying that is because the context before and the context after Jesus is going to talk about his death again. Jesus is asking us to compare the Transfiguration with his death. But I want to point out something right at the very beginning. We'll come back and answer this. Look at 17:6. So they go up a mountain, and when the disciples heard this, there's a voice that came. When the disciples heard this, they fell on their faces and were terrified. Why are they terrified? Also, go ahead. If you feel like you want to shout out an answer, that's great. Go ahead. I also want to add, I don't know if I had this in preaching mode, so I was kind of like taken back for a second, because I can't put the slides up. I think you got to do it now. Mark also says, so they hear the voice from heaven, and it says they're terrified, but Mark says that they were terrified the entire time they're seeing the glory. And I was actually reading one journal this week by one scholar, and he was saying that he thinks that it should be a question whenever Peter says, is it good that we are here? And the reason that he's wanting to build tents is like, think of the tabernacle, that's where the glory of God goes. So he's trying to conceal the glory of God, because what happens whenever somebody sees the glory of God, the face of God, what happens to them? They die. And so it says he's in terror in Mark. And so he wants to build a tent. So there's a voice from heaven, they're seeing this glory, and the disciples are afraid, they're in terror. Why is that? Why are they in terror? And should there be terror before God? Should we have terror? And whenever you meet God, do you think that if there's any chance it's going to be different than what you expect? I want you to imagine somebody who has committed some unspeakable crimes. They've gone out and they've done a whole lot of things. They've murdered people. They go to this store over here. They rob this store. They go and they rob this person, kidnap somebody else. And every single time they keep eluding the police. And the police are really after this guy. They're putting out wanted posters, commercials. Everybody, if you've seen this guy, we've got to arrest him. Is there any chance that that guy could walk into the police station and be fine? The criminal, could he just walk up into the police station? No. If anybody is committed to justice, That criminal and those that are committed to justice cannot share the same space. Why? Because that guy's committed crimes, and they are going to arrest and prosecute him. They can't share the same space. Well, every single one of us we have to bring this up every time, is that we are criminals before God. Every single one of us are sinners before God. Open up the books. If God has such a book and he could just open it up and everybody's name there and I could just go through the roster here, your name, it'd be criminal, double criminal for you. But it'd just be everybody would be a criminal. Everybody has this criminal, guilty status, all of us. And what about God? Who is God? So you know who we are. God is a just God. And so if he's holy and we're criminals, that means, just like the police, just like have to punish the criminals, this is how we are before God. That means wrath. I want you to think about the passages that speak of God's wrath. Some of the most terrifying things you see in Scripture, even before it talks about something like hell. You think about, Aaron's sons. They were, high priests. The high priests come from the lineage of Aaron, and his sons both were killed because they worshiped God in a way that God didn't prescribe. And then you think about when they're carrying the Ark of the Covenant, and the Ark of the Covenant is about to fall and hit the ground. Uzzah, he sticks out his hand to save it, and God strikes him dead because his hand is not fit to touch the seat of God. Since we're criminals, we have to back up and understand why there is terror. We cannot share the same space as God. We're criminals, and God is God. He is holy, and so we can't share the same space. Have you ever heard somebody they talk real tough whenever that person is gone? Maybe something they would do to them if they ever saw them. But whenever that person shows up, it's like a different story. Like they don't do everything they said they were going to do. Unbelievers, they might say they aren't afraid of God and they have no worries about it, but all of that changes whenever God actually shows up. And we see this again and again. What was the first thing Adam did whenever he sinned against God and he heard God walking in the garden? He hid. Yeah, he had fear. So he hid from the presence of God. What about when God comes near on Mount Sinai? He comes down the mountain and the mountain starts shaking. What do the Israelites do? They stand back, it says, in terror. They're afraid, right? They don't want to go near the mountain or they're going to die. Don't go up there. That's where God is. And if they go there, they're going to die. In Revelation, it says that unbelievers are going to carry on doing whatever they want, committing all kinds of egregious sin. But the second they see Jesus returning, they said they're going to ask for mountains to bury them because they don't want to endure his wrath. When God shows up, people start changing their tune. Things are different. Right now we are all hiding and unbelievers are hiding, but when God shows up, when God and man come together and they share space, if we are not holy, if we are not clean, if we are not forgiven, there should be terror. And Peter, James, and John are in terror because even like Isaiah, when he came into the presence of God, he says, "Woe is me." They understand their sinfulness, and they understand that they are near, and we'll get to this in a little bit, near God. How do you think that you're going to finally react whenever you meet God? Whenever you meet God, how do you think that that's going to go? Do you think that you're going to be able to stand in his presence, or do you think there's going to be terror? I will say, if you just live your life and you go doing, whatever you think is right in your mind, as Proverbs says, there's a way that seems right to a man. If that's the way that you live your life and you just go about it that way, when you meet God, there will be terror. There will be everlasting terror. I want to ask you, why do you think Jesus took him up on a mountain? Why a mountain? Outside of the temple, when you think of mountaintops, you just got to think this is where God is, right? God meets them often outside of the temple on mountaintops. All this changes after the resurrection, but the psalmist says he dwells on the mountaintops. He dwells on the mountaintops. And so the psalmist also asked, who shall ascend the mountain of the Lord? Who can go up the mountain and into God's presence? Who can stand before him? Who is able to do so? Is that you? Let me ask you this. Did anybody ever go up the mountain in the presence of God? Moses, yeah, there's one. Anybody else? Who went up and saw the glory of God, though? Specifically, it says that. There's Moses and who else is in the text with Jesus? Elijah, right? 17:3, look who's with Jesus. And behold, there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with him. So the Israelites can't go up the mountain, but Moses did, and Moses saw God's glory. And the same thing, Elijah, it says that he went up the mountain and he saw God's glory, he had to cover his face, he saw God's glory. The same thing happened, and now they're both on the mountaintops with Jesus. And we'll come back to this. So why were they able to do that? Why could they go up the mountaintops? How could they go into the presence of God and live? Is this God's presence only for like elite? You know, like Moses was a prince, right? And Elijah's a prophet. Is it just for like the legends of the faith that they can go into the presence of God? Is this just for the absolute best? Is it for the elite? Are we able to go into God's presence? So if we have guilt and we can't stand before God, if we can't save ourselves, what do you think the first thing God must do, right? We can't get up to the heavens. We can't get to the mountaintops. We can't get into God's presence. What must God do? Yeah, the first thing is you got to come down to us. He's got to come down to us. It's very obvious that we have failed to save ourselves. If you look at all the times... You can look at these covenants in a couple different ways that they were meant to be fulfilled by Christ, but yet you could still see it in a way that other people are trying to fulfill it. First off, you just look at the people who represent us before God. Adam, obviously, he failed. He couldn't do it. But then you go to these covenants that are being made, and the Sinai covenant, Israel is supposed to be a light to the nations. They're supposed to be a kingdom of priests. And they are to bring God's blessing that Abraham told Abraham, in you, all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. Well, the Israelites are supposed to bring that blessing to the nations. They obviously failed to do so. And so every single plan that has been enacted so far has all failed. Every time there is a human involved, because humans are part of the problem, because humans are infected with sin, we are unable to save ourselves. We are unable to go up the mountain. We are unable to go into God's presence. And so everybody starts understanding that the only way that there's any hope for any of us to be saved is we cannot look at humans anymore. We have to see God has to do something. God has to do something. We are just as more helpless as when the Israelites were in Egypt and God had to save them. We need God to come save us. And so the Old Testament, it starts understanding this. And so near the middle and near the end, they start calling on God to get off his throne and come. David says in the Psalms, Lord, come down. Lord, come down. Touch the mountaintops. Touch the mountain. Come down. Micah, he's saying this about judgment and salvation, but he says this. He says, behold, the Lord is leaving the heavens. And so they understand that the only way that we can be saved is if God does something. If God comes down. And he did come down in Jesus Christ. I've said this before, but one thing that separates Christianity from the other religions is every religion, it'll give you some rules, it'll give you a book, it'll say, read this, God's at the mountaintop, read this, and it'll tell you how to get up the mountain, it'll tell you how to get into God's presence. Our religion, Christianity, our God is the only one that actually comes down to us. And he doesn't just come down at the incarnation. He doesn't just descend. He becomes man. He's fit to represent us. What do you think is being revealed at the Transfiguration? What do you think is happening there? What do you want to think is one of the main things that's being revealed about Jesus? I'd say it's that he's the divine Son. He's the divine Son. I have a few arguments for this. One thing I want to explain it, though, look at verse 2. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. So this just bright. Remember, we've been talking about this the last couple of weeks in John. He's just this bright, glorious, blinding light. And the commentators are saying that the way it's being described is it's not just an external light. It's not like he's just light on the outside. They're saying it's like a translucent, like you can see the light coming through from inside of him. It's coming out, like they can see him being lit from within. All throughout him, he is light. He is the source of light. And it says he's like the sun, right? And I take that as one thing is that he is the source of light. So you see Moses and Elijah's face with glory too. But what happened whenever they went up the mountain the first time? They also had reflective glory. Moses went up to see the glory of God, and his face was shining after seeing God's glory. He had to hide his face from the Israelites. Same thing with Elijah. He had to hide his face after seeing the glory of light. So if Jesus is the sun, Moses and Elijah are the moon. They're reflecting light. They're reflecting glory. Verse 5, explicitly, the Father states, "This is my beloved Son." Jesus is the divine Son. It's as clear as it gets. God is proclaiming from the heavens this. Remember last week when John said Isaiah saw Jesus' glory when Isaiah met with God? I think that's the same point being made here. One thing that when you look at the Old Testament and you start seeing these, what I think are glimpses of Jesus Christ, because it's all inspired, it's all, God knew from the beginning the plan that would happen. He knew from the beginning, from the time Genesis is made, that he is going to bring Jesus onto the scene. And I think there's so many texts you can look at that point to Christ explicitly, but I think there's also pre-incarnate Christ, Jesus, that shows up at times. You think about like Daniel, not in the lion's den, but in Daniel 2 when he's in the fire with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who's the fourth person in the fire. I think it's like pre-incarnate Christ. I do think that the glory that Elijah and Moses had seen in the Old Testament, they are seeing Jesus. Jesus is God. Jesus is divine. And in the Old Testament, they go up the mountain, they see the glory of God, and they speak with God. But right here, the same thing is happening. They are up on the mountaintops with Jesus. They're seeing his glory, and the text says that they are talking with him. And what do we learn then? Moses and Elijah are up there, of course. That's a prince and a prophet. What do we learn about Peter, James, and John being on the mountaintop like Moses and Elijah? Is there anything we can learn from them? When we read the Old Testament, sometimes we might be able to conclude by looking at things like where Moses got to go up, but the Israelites had to stay back. Elijah was able to go up, but nobody else. We might be able to conclude that being with God, having this relationship with God, being in his presence, is only for the special people. It's only for the legends of the faith. It's not for anybody else. It's not for you and me. We're like the average Israelite. We need to stand back and just fear and not touch the mountain. Don't go near it or we'll die. Yet we see poor fishermen on the mountaintop. We see these poor, probably filthy-mouthed fishermen standing up on the mountaintop, hearing the glory of God, seeing the glory of God. If there was anybody in the New Testament that sort of had this idea that the elite or they are better than other people and they kind of look down on others, it would be some of not only the Sanhedrin, but many of the Pharisees. Even when Jesus is, whenever there is I believe a prostitute or something wiping Jesus' feet with her hair and her tears, they say to him, if you knew what kind of woman this was, you wouldn't have her anywhere near you. Like he should be disgusted by her, right? And Jesus offended the Pharisees by telling them that the tax collectors, the sinners, the prostitutes are entering the kingdom of heaven. And we can thank God, thank Jesus that he has come to fill the heavens with sinners. He has come down the mountain. He's come down from the heavens. He's made what was once untouchable, he's made them clean. He's come to take thieves into paradise. Is that you this morning? Do you feel unclean? Like, do you ask yourself, do you ever think to yourself, like, I think about this all the time, and I have confidence and hope does not put us to shame, as Romans 5 says. But I think to myself, there's nothing more I want in the world than whether Jesus returns or I die, that I would be able to stand in the presence of God, that like verse 8, that Jesus would say, "Rise, have no fear." Is that in you? Is that what you desire? Is your greatest desire in life to be able to stand in the presence of God and have no fear? To be clean? But then you go on and you start thinking about your uncleanliness. You start thinking about your sin, and you start seeing the text about God's holiness, and you start thinking to yourself, is there any way I can actually stand before God? Yes. Yes, there is. I think it's fitting that in verse 8, it says they lifted up their eyes and saw Jesus only. And I think that's because the only person that even the chief of sinners needs is Jesus. He's not done yet, though. He's got to do more than just come down from the heavens. There needs to be an exchange that's made with Jesus. To give us honor, he's got to take our shame. Jesus had to trade away the glories of heaven, the glories of the mountaintops for Golgotha. And so what we're about to do is we're about to look at some of the comparisons about, we've seen the glory that Jesus has in the transfiguration. I think this is the glory that Jesus had in eternity with the Father and the glory he received after the resurrection. Let's see what he traded. And Jesus, in John, he's going to be praying, the glory I had with you before the world began. Like, this is the glory he's always had with the Father. What did he leave to come down here? So let's compare. Let's compare the transfiguration with the cross. I think there's a reason that Jesus, all around this text, keeps saying, I must go die, after showing his glory. What did Jesus give up at the cross, or give up at the transfiguration, and what did he receive at the cross? What explicitly, if there's anything that you could have Jesus trade with you, what would it be? If there's anything in the world that you could pick, that the most important thing, what do you think that would be? That, Jesus, I want you to trade this with me. And if it's something silly like a baseball card, that is foolish. What would you want to trade with Jesus? Now, there was a movie I watched a long time ago, and I don't recommend it. I don't even remember. Yeah, this is like 20-something years ago, even before I was a Christian. But I just do remember a scene where these people go into some unknown country where they're at. It's a comedy. And they have like $2 to their name, so they can't do anything. They can't go anywhere. At least they think, because they're in this like broke third world country, and they have $2, and everybody starts treating them. They're like they're the president of the country or something like that. They start buying hotels. They start buying all kinds of stuff with just $2. Because the exchange rate is so crazy. The $2 U.S. dollars is worth so much in their country. The exchange rate is crazy. Well, the exchange rate with Jesus is the greatest exchange rate. We don't give Jesus anything of worth. We don't even give him $1. We don't give him $2. We give him the opposite. We give him things that are worth less than nothing. We give him things that nobody would want if you gave it to them for free. We give him our worst. We give him guilt and wrath, and he trades back to us innocence and life. The greatest trade you can have with Jesus is your guilty status being traded for his innocent status. Jesus becoming guilty in your place and you becoming innocent. This is what you want. This is the great exchange. It's forensic. 2 Corinthians 5 says, He made him who knew no sin to be sin on our behalf so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. And the key word is, how do you become righteous? In him, right? But when it talks about that he was made to be sin on our behalf, it means that Jesus took the guilt of our sin. He didn't actually become sinful. He didn't actually start acting like you and me. He was just considered sinful. He took the guilt of sin, right? And the same thing, we take the status of being innocent, the status of being righteous in him, in him. Do we see that in the Gospels? So I've given you a text, 2 Corinthians 5, talks about that great exchange, that substitute. Do you see this exchange in the Gospels anywhere, this substitution where with the innocent and guilty, the exchange happening? I think it's the biblical writers, they don't write out doctrine specific like the way Paul would and stuff like that. They do narratives, but yet they stitch doctrine into the narrative through people. And where you see substitution stitched into the narrative is Barabbas. It's Barabbas. Think about it. It explicitly says, in a couple Gospels even more than the others, there's Barabbas and there's Jesus. And the text explicitly says Barabbas is a murderer, he's an insurrectionist, he's guilty. It says with Jesus that I find no guilt in him, he's innocent. It clearly says that Jesus is innocent and guilty, not guilty. They make a point to say that he's done nothing wrong. They make it a point to say that over again, and they make a point to say that Barabbas is guilty. And yet, what do the crowds want? They call out for Barabbas. We want Barabbas. And so what you're seeing is the condemnation of the innocent so the guilty can go free. Substitution. That's the gospel. We are Barabbas. This is what's happening. Jesus is taking our place on the cross. That exchange between Pilate and the crowd, this is the conversation God had between the Father. I will take their place. I'll take the place of the guilty. So let's do a Bible study real quick. I want you to keep open, if you can, on the transfiguration on the cross and sort of do a contrast. And there's so many here. We can't look at them all for time's sake. I had to cut some out, but we'll look at a few of them. So because Jesus took our guilty status and made us innocent, Jesus gets other things in return. Do you notice anything different about clothing between the transfiguration and the cross? If anybody sees anything, feel free to yell it out. (17:2), he's got bright clothes. That's transfiguration. What do they do with his clothes at the cross? They cast lots for it, right? Why do they cast lots for his clothes? Why do they take his clothes? We got to go back. I mean, just like the crowd say, free Barabbas, free Barabbas. We can almost hear the humanity chant, this is all of us, give us his honor, but give him our shame. So you think about after the fall, what knowledge becomes symbolic, a symbolic reminder of our shame that we have? What immediately does Adam know about that becomes symbolic for our shame? Nakedness. I don't know who that was, but amazing answer. Yes, our nakedness. So when Adam and Eve were innocent, it says, I think 3 times, that they were naked and unashamed. So just innocent, even just innocent kids that don't understand what's happening or why they're naked, they are saying that Adam and Eve are naked and unashamed. There is no shame in their nakedness. The second that Adam sinned, what does it say that he finally knew and understand? He knew he was naked, and so he hid. And so what did God do? I mean, this is symbolic for our shame. So what did God do for Adam? Does anybody know? Had a sacrificed an animal and covered him, right? Well, that animal isn't the sacrifice that covers us. Jesus is. And so let us remove the bright clothing that he wore at the transfiguration. Let us cast lots for his clothes on the cross. Let him lay up there and sacrifice him naked. Let him take our shame. And when humanity yells, "Crucify him," it's like we're saying we need this sacrifice to cover us, because we do. Do you see any difference between the people he's with? He stands between some people and both of them. We've got Moses and Elijah at the transfiguration. Who's he in between on the cross? Two thieves, right? Exchanges the praise of standing between Moses and Elijah for the mocking, at least at first, between two thieves. And yet he hangs there so that literal criminals can enter paradise even that day. Is there a difference in the weather? 17:5, what does it say there? There's bright clouds. And in chapter 28, there's, or is it 20, 27, 28, darkness. The brightness talks about God's approval. The darkness is talking about judgment. Whenever God wants to make a point, he can use all things, and he can really set a mood, and he can use the environment, he can use the weather, and often whenever God's judgment is coming, he will make the mountains shake, he'll make the clouds and everything just turn dark and black. And so Jesus, so that we can stand under the bright clouds, so that we can be in God's presence, he trades away the bright clouds for the utter darkness that's on the cross. Is there any difference between the way the Father they're talking to each other, or the Father is treating him whenever he becomes guilty? Is there any contrast between the Father and the Son on the transfiguration and the cross? The Father in the transfiguration, "This is my beloved Son," verse 5. They had this close fellowship, this intimacy, this glory together from forever. They're eternal, not ever created. They've always had it. But then on the cross, Jesus cries out, "Why have you forsaken me?" Intimacy to being forsaken. And then, if you want to see how we act at the different places, whenever Jesus is on the mountaintops in glory, we're right there. It's good that we're here. Let's stay here forever. Where's Peter at the cross? He says, "I don't even know him," denies him 3 times. It's easy to be in a place right here, right now, where Jesus is worshiped, where Jesus is lifted high, and to stand here and say high things about Jesus and love Jesus. How do you do outside of here? When Jesus is not thought so highly of, when Jesus is persecuted, when Jesus is mocked or talked about, do you stand with him then, or do you not know him? Yeah, Jesus, what he's doing, we must learn to see the cross as glorious too, and perhaps the highest glory, a revealing of his glory. But all of that he exchanged. He traded away, the mountains, the transfiguration, the heavens, so that he could say to us in verse 7 at the transfiguration, "Rise, have no fear," so that we can stand in the presence of God with no fear. So do you want that? Do you want no fear when you stand before God? And I think, like Verse 8, then set your eyes on Jesus only. Set your eyes on Jesus only. I think 17:8, and when they lifted up their eyes, they saw no one but Jesus only. That might be the most glorious part of the Transfiguration. Because for centuries, theologians have said that the angels have always stood before God and they've seen the bright, glorious lights, and they've seen that. One thing they've never seen is the depths of his love that was on the cross. And I can't think of anything more glorious than seeing Jesus, God, as a human, ready to go to the cross for us. Lifting up your eyes and seeing Jesus only, that would be the most glorious sight as he's prepared to go down the mountain and go die. The other reason is that it's Jesus only. We all need to be saved. What if they opened up their eyes and what they had before them to save them was 1 billion men? Would that do it? If they opened up their eyes and they're about to go to Golgotha, to Jerusalem, and they had 1 billion men before them to redeem them, would that work? No. You just need Jesus only. And that just goes right along with Romans 3:28, that we are saved by faith in Jesus Christ, and it's in Jesus Christ alone and not in anything that we do. And so if you are setting your eyes on Jesus plus some works, if you're setting your eyes on a religious system that teaches that you can begin by the Spirit but be completed by good works or the flesh or this and that, if you are setting your eyes on Muhammad or somebody else to get you up the mountaintop, it will fail. I pray that you just see Jesus only. Let's pray. Father, if there's anybody here that isn't